What's up, Ragnarok fans? In today's video, I'm going to discuss the different defensive stats that we have here in Ragnarok X so that you can better build your character. And these are the different defensive stats for today's discussion. First, we have the defense and MDef, and of course the percent final defense and MDef, and we have these characteristics of the stat here. So this is the first stat that will decrease the initial damage intake of your character. And percent final penetration will decrease this stat, which I will explain later. Ignore defense skills will cancel out this stat, meaning if you use a certain skill with ignore defense capability, you will not look into this stat. Okay, so it will not matter even if the target has 1000% final defense or percent final MDef. It will not matter if you're going to use ignore defense skills. And lastly, critical hits will also ignore defense, right? So all of this actually I already tested in some of my videos. So you can compute for the percent final defense by adding the value converted in percentage in base stat and the percent final MDef in advanced stat. So what do I mean by that is, if you go to your character, go to the go to the points, details. Here you can find my defense, and if you click on this one, the 2380 value, it has a converted value in percentage, which is 66.5%. And then you have another final defense in here, which is this one, 15%. Now you're going to add the 2 so that you can come up with your total defense, which in my case, 66.5 plus 15, that would be 81.5%. And I am going to use this value for a simple computation when, let's say, the enemy has a penetration value. Now, let's take a look at this example. If, let's say, the enemy hitting you has a 50% penetration, his damage will be reduced initially by 31.5%. So, 50, which is the penetration of the attacker, minus the 81.5, which is my percent total defense. Okay, the resulting value will be negative 31.5%. So, negative, it means you are going to reduce the initial attack of that character. Now, what if the enemy has a higher penetration than your total defense? Then, if let's say he has a 100% penetration, so his damage will be amplified by 18.5%, which is 100% penetration minus 81.5. So, the resulting value will be positive 18.5%. Therefore, his damage will be amplified by 18.5%. So, how do you determine the final penetration of your character? You simply go to the M pen or P pen. So, in this case, I have 0.60% on my P pen, which makes sense because I'm not a physical user. But on my M pen, I have 54.95% here. And of course, you will add it with the final M pen, which is 28%. So that's how you determine your overall penetration value. And of course, the examples in here are just the initial damage reduction. After that, it can still be amplified by other factors like damage bonus, PvP damage bonus, or some other modifiers like size, racial, and elemental. But of course, in PvP, we don't have any modifiers in race and size, at least in this version of Ragnarok. The next stat will be the P damage reduction, M damage reduction, and the final percent P damage reduction and M damage reduction. So before, I'm a strong believer of this stat, but after some testing that I did during PvP, I found out that this stat is only excellent during PvE, but almost useless or nerfed during PvP. So what is this stat? Well, basically, you can find it on the details section, and in here, you can find the P damage reduction, M damage reduction, as well as the percent final P damage reduction here, and then the final M damage reduction, which I cannot find. Oh, here. So what does this mean? If let's say I have a 0 P damage reduction and the monster is hitting me at 100, of course the monster will have a damage to me of 100. But if let's say I increase my P damage reduction into 96, the new damage of that monster will be 4. So how I arrive with that answer, 100 minus 96, that would be 4. So that is the basic calculation of that stat. Now, that is not the case during PvP. So you will not reduce it by 96. Instead, it will be way less than 96. Now, this is the sample damage calculation of how this stat works. So first, we have the N, which is the damage minus the damage resistance. This one is the same thing as the P damage reduction or the M damage reduction. And then the new damage or the reduced damage is the N, which is this one, minus N times percent final damage reduction over 100. So this one will be this one. So this is an example. If let's say a certain monster has a 1000 P damage on you, and then suddenly you equip a 300 P damage reduction card or an enchant, as well as a card of 10% final P damage reduction. So the monster reduced damage will be 630 by following this same calculation. So 1000 minus 30, you have 700. And then 700 minus 700 times 10, which is the percent final P damage reduction, over 100. So if you do the arithmetic of this, you will come up with 630. So from 1000 P damage, it will be reduced, or the new damage will be 630. So basically, you reduce it with 370, right? But during PvP, that will not be the same case. The damage reduction will be very less or so much less, which means it is greatly nerfed during PvP. You can test it on your own. I already made that testing on this one. And one thing that I've noticed is that before, my armors are enchanted with P damage reduction, and then I change into defense. And one thing I noticed is that I became much more tougher than before. against non-crit opponents. So I'm more tougher against penetration builds, right? And skill builds or haste builds that doesn't have any ignore defense skills. And lastly, it's only a good counter against classes with a DMG bonus or percent final damage bonus builds because the two will cancel out each other during PvP. But if you would ask me, I'd rather build my class with pure penetration than having damage bonus, right? During PvP. Because penetration, again, is much more effective damage amplifier. And lastly, of course, we have the PvP version of P damage and M damage reduct and the PvP version of percent final P damage and M damage reduct. So this one is the best reduction during PvP, of course, and in here, what you see is what you get. So whatever value you see is what you get, and you can apply it directly on the damage reduction calculation from before. So let's say a certain player is hitting you at 1000 P damage, or you are receiving 1000 P damage from a certain player, and then suddenly you equip a 300 PvP damage reduction and 10% PvP final P damage reduction. The new damage of that player will be 630. So you were able to reduce 370 PvP damage on that player, which is a lot, right? So that's how the PvP damage reduction works. And of course, you have the anti-crit and the flee, so which are also other types of defensive mechanisms. So basically, the hit is the counterpart of flee and the crit is the counterpart of anti-crit. And that's just basically it about the defensive stats here in Ragnarok X. So I hope it will guide you on building your character. Thank you and bye-bye.